Hello and welcome to We Turned Out Okay. This is the show where we are always working to help you change your child's behavior from bad to good, feel happy inside, and truly enjoy family time. And I'm Karen Locke Culp. I'm the host of the show and the creator of WeTurnedOutOK.com. And I'm super excited. I'm sitting here with Jennifer Louden, a personal hero. This is her book, and you can buy it because it is out. I actually had I have, Jennifer, a whole introduction written, which I would love to read. Typically, I don't record these for video, but I'd love to read it. Anyway, but first I want to say welcome, welcome. I'm really glad to have you.
Thank you. I'm just delighted to be here and get to talk to you.
Yeah, I'm excited too. And I want to read this because it's from your website, and sometimes you go to a website and what you're seeing are like just things that don't really resonate. And everything on your website, I was like, I want to read them, the whole thing.
That's so great.
Comfortable and comforting. So so this is everybody. This is what Jennifer Louden writes on on her about page. Here's what happens when you declare your desire to create something, but you don't follow through. You learn not to trust yourself. You learn you can't be counted on. You learn that what you want, it doesn't matter. You learn not to listen to and follow through on the thread of your life, which eventually leads you to conclude you're simply not good enough, which is a big soul-sucking lie. My job, Jennifer's job, is to help you discover what's keeping you from getting your scary leap done so you can finally get your creative, important, and straight up joyful work out of your head and your heart and into the world. Whether that work is a book, a business, an act of activism, more health, more connection, whatever calls to you. And to that end, Jennifer Louden has written an entire book called Why Bother to help you stay motivated to do whatever it is that calls to you. In fact, Jennifer has written 8 books, including the Women's Comfort book, which is next on my list. Her books have sold nearly 1 million copies. She's a public speaker. She speaks at retreats. She appears on national television. And she is spreading a message about what it takes to get the scary bleep done and why we should actually bother. I'm super excited to bring her onto the show. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jennifer Louden. Welcome.
As well. We should have you been watching any of the late night people? They're doing their shows from home, and some of them have they have a little sound machine right there, and they'll play different kinds of. Yeah. We need that.
I'm loving that. There's one called have you ever seen Some Good News by John Krasinski? It is like I love it. I'm going to actually link to it because I've talked about it before, but everybody needs to check out SGN. It's like just some good news,
Yeah, and the longer this goes on, the more we need it.
The more we need it. Exactly. So just for reference, anybody listening in the far future, we are recording in May of 2020. In fact, to me, this feels more anxiety inducing right now. So we've been in lockdown for like 8 weeks. And now there's this, so our governor just the other day, I think it was yesterday, he basically outlined his plan for getting us back to normal, but he's even saying this isn't normal. This is new normal. And it's like,
what does that mean? What is new normal? Is it going to work? Yeah, there's so much. And where do you live?
I live in Massachusetts.
Oh, wow. You guys have been hard hit.
Yes, we have. It has been, it's really been an odyssey here. And in fact, you live in Colorado.
I do.
Where my parents live. And in fact, on March the 13th, when everything was shutting down, we were still there. My son and I were visiting, and we were not feeling well. And it was actually, by then we were recovered. We were able to go home 2 days later. But we thought we weren't going to be able to get out. I mean, it's been, and that's not even like, those are the minor inconveniences, right? Like what's hard about this? Do you find this hard too? This is a time, I think of it as both terrifying and tedious.
Yes, terrifying and tedious. And there's a remove from the terror for so many of us that I think is really increasing the misinformation and the divide in the U.S. I know everyone listening isn't in the U.S. and has functioning governments in other parts of the world. We won't go there. And I think it muffles your terror and it makes you doubt it. I find 17 times a day going, how bad is it? Because in Boulder County, where I live, we haven't had many cases. And both my husband and I work at home. So a lot of things look the same.
Yeah. Yes. So my husband, he became unemployed in January. And so we'd already sort of been having a seismic shift. And we got very comfortable with both of us sharing this office, for example. And he started a new gig about a month ago, and he is currently in like our bedroom because we're good at this now. But like we got good at it before everything changed, and so it didn't feel. The things that shifted were like our son's college experience completely changed.
Yeah.
Our younger son's high school experience completely changed, and you know, the people around us, everybody's sort of been struggling, but especially for me, I've been working at home. I've been doing this for 5 years. I had heard of Zoom years and years ago, and I know people who are still getting comfortable with it, and it's hard work. And in the meantime, everything's changing, and we'll see where it all goes. I'm really happy to have you here to help us kind of get through it. I feel like I have a script, like I have questions, I have things I want to talk about, but I'm very tempted to kind of just go away from that and just talk, because this book, I just love it. I mean, I'm really, really enjoying it. I knew I was going to buy it, and I knew I was going to enjoy opening it, but I've just been drawn in on like every page, and there's a real magic to that. And I think it has to do with you speak to people's anxieties and worries.
Hmm.
Does that feel like the place where you kind of start?
You know, I think I've been reading, I'm really not very often, but occasionally I will go and read my reviews. And one of the things that the reviews say a lot is I feel like Jen's in my head. Like I actually look around when I'm reading the book and go, oh my God, did she like come here and like spy on me when she was writing the book? And I think that maybe just speaks to my, being being everybody, I'm having that human experience too, and I'm just able to put it into words. So,
Yeah.
and I also think it speaks to my intention behind the book, which may be your intention as well in the work that you do, which is I don't have an answer. I never have had an answer, but I want to be there to walk with you. I want to companion you.
Yeah.
And that was my biggest intention with the book.
That's exactly it. Like there's a giant list of questions. There's like a whole huge, like pages long checklist of questions, and they may not all resonate, but some of them, and I've been like longtime listeners will know, I've been on a real journey of kind of self-recovery for a long time. I've had a tendon disorder since, since 2011. So it'll be 9 years this coming summer. And in that time, I've like lost the ability to walk and regained it. And I've lost the ability to use my hands for any practical reason and regained it. And
Wow.
there would be no podcast. There would be no website. There would be no books. There would be none of this. There would be no community without that. Like I had to come through that to get to this.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I look at these and I totally do these. You know what I mean? These, and you write in here somewhere early on, you write about how you had thought that the whole thing was all going to be great once you were meditating because you would never suffer again. And I feel like one of the things I've learned is that like the suffering is kind of a part of it, and that's okay.
I used to think if I ate clean enough and meditated enough and was successful enough and just keep, filling in the blank, we could go on for the rest of the show.
Yeah.
Then the suffering would end and the angels would descend. And I think that in some ways, a lot of us drink that Kool-Aid. We may fill in a different blank, right? If I'm thin enough, or if my children are successful enough, or happy or recovered or whatever, we're always kind of making a when-then for ourselves. And when we do that, I discovered we really can create the conditions for what I call the grubby bummer side of why bother to descend on us.
Yeah.
And really suck the meaning out of our life, which may be quite beautiful and meaningful, but we're not present for it.
Yeah. So when you talk about why bother, you're not just talking about, for example, I mean, I think if people want to, right, writing a book or performing in a play or writing music or something like that. I feel like it's bigger than that, isn't it?
Oh gosh, yes. In fact, one of my neighbors from my former life, when we moved to Colorado about 5 years ago, from Bainbridge Island near Seattle. And when the book came out, she asked me on Facebook, is this just for creative people? I'm like, oh God, no. To me, the thing that I discovered that I really wanted to write about in this book is that why bother times are natural and inevitable. They happen to every human. And I think we feel so much shame around them and we don't talk about them. And the more privileged we are, or the more opportunities we've had, or the more that we know people who are suffering or work with people who are really suffering, the more that we go, I shouldn't have this feeling. But my message is, of course you're going to have this feeling. Life is a creative process and it goes through all kinds of waves. And when you have this feeling, and you may language it some way completely different. You may say, what's the point? Or it's too late, or I'm too old, or it's too hard, or, blah, blah, blah. I can't, not until.
When the kids are older.
When the kids are older, right, exactly. When mom's, passed, right? I used to do that because my mom had Alzheimer's. When mom, or when she doesn't know me anymore, weird things like that. Then I will really ask the question. But what I think life is asking us to do is ask the question often. And there's not a right answer, and there's not, yes, of course you should bother. This is not a positive thinking book in any way, shape, or form. It's if you're in a why bother time, there's a question that needs to be asked. And the problem is we don't usually ask it. We think we know the answer.
Yeah.
And the answer is no. Right? The answer is yes, but when the kids are, right?
Yes.
And somehow that doesn't arrive.
Yeah. And I think it's even as simple as, you're lying in bed in the morning and you hear your baby in the crib and you're like, oh, I just can't even get up. Like,
Absolutely. It comes through in little ways. It doesn't have to be like your whole life or your career or your marriage. It can just be like, why bother to go down in the basement and exercise?
Yeah. Why bother?
I'm just going to have to do it again tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, just starting with that, I'm just curious about if you've got thoughts for someone who literally that is their thinking, like, why bother? I'm just going to have to eat again in a couple hours.
Yeah. So the sort of the big thing that I can offer is that the first thing we have to do is normalize it. Right? And what I think we do is we judge ourselves, or we assume again, okay, yeah, I just have to eat again in 4 hours, so why bother to make myself a nice meal? Like right there is the opportunity that I'm asking you to actually consider. Maybe you don't want to bother to eat. Maybe you just want to eat cheese and crackers. I had an apple and cheese for lunch, right? I didn't want to bother to make a salad before this, but I actually asked myself. I actually reflected. I'm like, is this good enough? Yeah, this is fine. This is fine, friend. This is what I'm craving. This is what I want, I don't want to make a salad. I don't want to like crunching and chewing. But we don't stop and ask, right? We don't stop and ask.
Sometimes the answer is like, well, actually, I don't have to because here's this other way to go. Like, that's so interesting.
And then we begin to free up the energy to bother about the things we want to.
Yeah.
I mean, in those small examples, I don't want to go for a run. Okay, well, let's stop here and ask myself, why don't I want to go for a run? Is my body really sore? Have I been pushing my body too hard? For me, this is just me as a runner, like, have I gotten into a mindset that I have to run fast? Or, maybe I'm training for a race that I don't really want to do. My husband really wants to do the race. Like, it's a constant reassessment.
Yeah.
And it sounds laborious. It doesn't have to be. It's quite life-giving.
I think I would think of it another way that I've thought of it as sort of the universe talking to me a little bit. Like today I had this experience of, it's been a really grueling week. It's been a graduation week for many people around me. And I happen to be of the age where we've got lots of friends whose kids should be graduating, aren't graduating. And there's a lot, not just for that reason, but there's just lots and lots and lots of high emotions in the air. We've been joking that like, oh, it's been a good day because I only cried once today. It's like, that's because when I'm in a high emotional state, like that's just what you get. And this morning, I haven't been sleeping well the last couple of days. There's some allergy issues, blah, blah, blah. And I was at the computer and I was done with the work that I sort of needed to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought to myself, okay, now I'm going to do this other thing that I really ought to do. Otherwise, I'm just putting it off until tomorrow. And I thought, I didn't ask the question, why bother? But I asked a similar question, which is like, well, wait, like, is this really, what's going to be better for me right now? And the universe the universe literally said, go for a walk. And I was like, okay, like really off schedule. This isn't the time of day. This is my work time. Usually. And I did it. And it just made everything else better.
Yeah. So in the little process that I lead people through in the book, that's the desire component, right? You could have asked, what do I want? In this case, you asked, what's better for my body? What does my body want? I might language it. And when we begin to bring just a pure sense of possibility of even knowing what our desires are, even though there's so many situations and moments in life that we can't act on them, AKA the baby years.
Yes. Yeah.
That begins to, again, it brings choice back into our lives. It begins to bring the truth, I matter, back into our lives, which can be such a struggle during the young parenting years. And it begins to bring in a sense of, I deserve to know my desires, even if I can't act on them.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you know them, is there a way that you can be working towards them just a little bit?
Exactly. Which again, it creates that energy. Like what I'm trying to get people to do with the book is say, it's not about a plan. It's not about arriving someplace. It's not about self-improvement. It's about letting the flow of life speak to you and animate you so that you like being here. You like living this life. And then if that gives you more courage or ideas or chutzpah to go do other things in life or make big changes, fantastic. That's fantastic. But that's not the point. The point is we fall into these why bother swamps, sometimes again, minorly and sometimes majorly, and they drain our energy away. And then that begins to permeate everything.
Yeah.
And exhaust us and make things feel pointless. And we become those people we don't want to be, right? We all know them. Their mouths are always pursed and they're about as much fun as, I don't know, I could say something political, but I won't.
I totally get that. And I have felt it. So I'm actually looking at my notes because something is occurring to me again. On your About page, you have these wonderful segments like what I'm obsessed with, what delights me. And then there's one that's really calling to me right now, which is what's tripping me up. And I guess I'm thinking about it because like, that's another way to look at these things is like, stuff is, there's all, just like we sort of hate to say it this way, right? But there's suffering isn't like something that is ever going to just be over forever.
No, nope.
And things are always going to attempt to trip us up. And so I don't know if you, I would love it if you would share, Jennifer, about something that has been tripping you up and like how you're dealing with it. Or even if you're not, like if you're not there yet, just,
so we're in the pandemic for those of you, again, just who are tuning in.
Yeah.
And so before the pandemic started, I had a 10-city book tour planned. I had scaled my business back for this year, so I had time to spend a year promoting this book because that's how committed I am to it, how much I love it. It's 11 years in the making.
Wow.
And a big part of my income often, but especially this year, that we are always fill are my retreats. So I do desire retreats based on the book, and I do writing retreats. And we're like, okay, no problem. I know I can pay my bills. Everything else is gravy. We can always live on. I know I'll make enough for us to be fine. And guess who's now had to cancel 4 retreats, right? And so I got a PPE loan. I've been doing some things online, right? But we just had to cancel the July retreat because the facility won't be open. So we still hope that we'll be able to have 3 live events this year, but we're not sure. And so that has been easily tripping me up because what happens in my mind, Karen, is that I go to like, okay, if I just, I can imagine that the July event, which is much shrunk and it is a workshop in my house, and I feel like we can really safely handle it and do it. I'm like, okay, it's over. And it's that Sunday. And I'm like, I did it, right? And so I'm jumping ahead. I'm leaving my life to some place where I will have a sense of certainty. And that's what our brains do. Oh gosh, if Oprah would just call, if Reese would just call, if they would just pick the book, then everything would be off to the races. And things are going really well, but like, so then I go there, if that will just happen. And I have learned from long practice that that's the fastest way to make myself unhappy, to leave my life, to make myself heartsick. But it's a real practice to keep coming back to here and today and what I can do. And,
And it's yeah. So it's a bit of a continual, it's almost like a meditation where
Oh, yes.
it's just, you just have to keep returning to it and telling yourself it's okay if you lost the focus, you could just have to come back, right?
Yeah, the best meditation advice, well, some of the best meditation advice I ever got was you get to place your attention where you want,
Yeah.
right? And
Uh,
so I want to be, if I ever got a tattoo, it would say, be here for it all.
oh, I love that.
So I want to be here for this experience called life. I don't want to be waiting for Oprah to call. And
Yeah.
Oprah has called, and it didn't work anyway. So
I'm really glad you brought that up. I wanted, one of the things that when I heard about, I'm going to link to your, both of your conversations with Dan Blank. Dan has been on my show. He's been super helpful with helping people be creative, even when they're raising children, right? Even
right, because he has
all
two
these other
young
things that are
ones.
going
Yeah.
on. But you have done have had two fabulous conversations with him, and I just want to make sure that I write them down. That I want them to, that I want this to be yours with him. And in one of them, in the first one, I think you talk about how you got to be on Oprah, and going into it, you had one set of expectations, and then coming out of it, things didn't look quite the same as you had thought, right? Can you share that with us? Because for those of us who would think like being on Oprah is going to be the pinnacle.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple things. This was back in the old days. So this was like 1998, 1999. So, it was the regular Oprah show. And at that time, I knew other authors who had been featured, who had been like on multiple times, and it had made them incredibly made their career. So I began to really push for this. I had people email the Oprah show. I had a vision board, the whole thing. I was incredibly focused on it. And one day I got the call from one of their producers, but here's the thing. And this was a choice moment for me. I don't think it really was a choice moment, but it was to be a guest on an episode, the guest expert on an episode about women who were afraid to eat alone. And right then I should have said, this is not my dream. This is not what I want. And instead I said yes. And then in my mind, I turned it into, this is going to be this amazing thing.
So quick question.
Yeah.
What did you think, what would you have, like, what experience would you have rather had on Oprah?
Oh, she would have been like, Oprah loves your book. She's going to have you on. I mean, they showed one of my books, the Woman's Retreat book. It was my fourth book. Oprah loves your book.
So the focus wasn't on sort of you and your work. It was like, here's a supporting person who's going to address this problem.
Who's going to coach you on this problem.
Yeah.
And, and again, it's cool to say you're on Oprah, and it sells copies of books, and, but my fantasy was that Oprah was going to tell me, even though I knew what I was getting into, Oprah was going to tell me, I love your work. And then I was finally going to believe in myself as a writer. Right?
Yes.
My fourth book, you guys, I already had hundreds of thousands of copies in print, lots and lots of success, but I didn't believe in myself. And I didn't believe in my ability to keep doing this, or my right to keep doing it. And I had a very fraught relationship with being in the personal growth world. And I thought Oprah was going to make that all go away. Nobody can make that all go away. Right? I was talking to a friend today who had a huge New York Times bestseller about 10 years ago, and she thought being on the New York Times bestseller list would make it all go away, right? Whatever her version of, please tell me I'm enough, or tell me I'm a success, or, fill in your blank. And no, it doesn't happen then either. So that was a real lesson for me. But unfortunately, or fortunately, or however we work as humans, I didn't know that. Like, I was just really disappointed and depressed, and really fell into a why bother time. Again, I wouldn't have used the words then, but I was like, what? I didn't know that I had to learn to choose me, and to choose my right to have a voice, and to be creative, or whatever. Again, fill in your blank, to be the kind of parent you are, right? Which is something that you're always teaching and helping people with, not the kind of parent your mother was, or the kind of parent your grandmother told you you're supposed to be.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that I hear more almost than anything else is, well, my friend said,
yes.
I've got this friend, I really rely on them, and they said that I should do it this way. What do you think? And I've heard some things that frankly, I mean, my jaw has been on the floor because like it was just so hurtful to children, and I think it can be really easy for us to get caught up in that, and that feeling of, oh, well, this is this trusted adult. This is this person that they raised me, or whatever.
Yeah.
And,
or they have a PhD, or
yeah, exactly. Or they, yeah, yeah. And I mean, so I speak, just coming back to the dependent disorder for a moment. I didn't know what was happening when it first happened, right? Like, the first thing that happened was my knee stopped working and became extremely painful. And so I was told, oh, it's probably bursitis. So take Advil for a couple of weeks and then it'll be fine. So the last day of that, I happened to be at Storyland, which is a big amusement park. And I thought of getting a wheelchair, and I thought, I'm sure I'm fine. I've been feeling okay for probably a week or something like that. And I walked for like 10 hours all over that. And the next day was the last day that I could walk. The next day was when things started to get really, really bad. And even then I went to an orthopedist, and I spent probably 6 months getting cortisone shots. And finally she said, well, I'm going to give you this brace. There's not much else we can do for you. And what I heard was, it's over. You're never walking again.
Right. Why bother to try?
Why bother to try? Exactly. And it was my parents. So the following January, that was in August, that I got my first cortisone shot. And this is after months of physical therapy and everything too. And in January, my parents came from Colorado. They live in Summit County.
Okay.
And
they were hard hit.
Yes, they were hard hit. Yeah. They're okay. And they're actually still there. They've been sheltering in place and everything like that. But things are tense up there, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, they came here, and they saw that one leg was like half the size of the other. I literally, where somebody's shin muscle kind of goes out, mine was like, it went in. I mean, I had no muscle in this leg at all. And my folks were horrified. And they joined with my husband to say, like, okay, somebody else you got to go somewhere else. And I was like, why? I literally said, why bother? Why should I? What are they going to say that this doctor didn't already say? And I went somewhere else and I can walk again. Not only that, but I can ski again. I can hike. I can do the things I love to do. And,
Karen, this is such an important story for people that hear. I'm so glad you told it. You just went through the entire process of what we do when we give up, and we internalize that feeling of there's no point, right? I mean, this is silly compared to yours, but I lost a tooth in front of my mouth because of some not great dentistry. Right in the front of my mouth, people. Really unattractive look.
It is just as important as my story.
No, it isn't. It's totally cosmetic. It's not like you'll never walk again. And I went through the same thing in a minor way with what you went through, which is I had the tooth pulled. I was supposed to get an implant. The first bone graft fails. And then the dentist or oral surgeon or whatever you call him, he was like, I can't do implant there. It's too small. And I was just going to give up, right? And then I went, and my husband was the same, right? We need these people in our lives that says no. So I got another opinion, and they said, oh yes, we need to do another bone graft. We can totally do a implant. And then that dentist happened to suddenly move away. So I had to go to a new guy, and he's like, if someone puts an implant in there, it's going to kill the 2 teeth next to it. And you will have no teeth in the front of your mouth. You need braces. So I have braces now to close the gap. So, right, like, and I know we can fall into our own why bother thing around things like this, because I've got to go to another appointment, right? Especially as we're aging. I'm 57. It can feel like a full-time job sometimes. But you hear our stories in your head to keep bothering.
Yes. And I was just going to say too, one of the things that was hardest for me about going to somebody else was the idea that I had given up hope. It was easy to not be hopeful anymore. And so here's somebody like, if I go to this stupid appointment and I get disappointed again, it is going to break my heart. I don't know how I'm going to keep on going. So that, like, there's a lot of like muck you have to kind of crawl.
There's a lot of the way that our brains are structured that makes it safer to give up.
Yes. But here's the thing, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, like, there's gold on the other side of the muck. Like, you just have to keep going. You just have
to get support and get tools like in the book, and get whatever you can. And it's okay if you give up for a day. It's okay if you give up for a week, right?
Yeah.
It's okay if you say, okay, I can't deal with anything more. And then you have someone hold you accountable to start bothering again.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I've got goosebumps. This is such a good conversation.
It's such a good story, though. I really love that story. And then there's also, I just want to reflect one more thing about it. There's the experts, and we are taught to either question them to the point where you're my daughter, and it's like, okay, no, you really do have to go to the doctor once a year and get a pap smear. You really do have to go get your teeth cleaned twice a year, right?
Yep.
To the other way where we give our power away. And that's, I think, a little bit more true of my generation and beyond, right? Because they were the gods. And I've had a lot of medical stuff in my life to question, and something doesn't feel right, or, and it's hard. It's hard, but it's necessary.
Yeah. Yeah. I think about this idea a lot. Like, what you were just saying about being of a certain generation, and sort of like, so authority figures, hit us a little bit harder maybe. But I feel like something else that I think may be true for a lot of listeners is the idea that they just don't know who to trust.
Yeah.
There's too much. There's too much information. You can, like, if you go on the internet, I was just reading recently about a scandal where somebody, and it was a techie person who got really taken in. They got an email or something, I think, that said, hey, come and reset your password at this link or whatever. And so they were like, well, I'm going to be smart about this. Go outside of my email, go to Google and like type this in. And what came up first was something that was put there by the scammers, and sort of like using the correct keywords and the right stuff. So this guy he did that, and then he was like, oh, well, I guess it's legit. And he filled it out, and he ended up getting scandalized. Fraud was committed against him, because I was like, holy mackerel, like, how do you know who to trust?
Mm-hmm. It is a bigger question than we've ever had to ask before, both the internet and what it's brought into our lives, the siloing of our culture, right? And for good and for bad, like, we don't all listen to, Chet Brinkley. We don't all listen to, Walter Cronkite.
Mm-hmm.
So we have the great thing is we have this plethora of voices and cultures, and we're becoming, we're so much broader than we ever could have been, even 10 years ago. But the bad news is, of course, that there's bad actors, and then there's the deliberate sowing, as in SOW, of misinformation. And, we're seeing that really in a big, huge way with the pandemic. I think it's about developing our critical thinking skills. And if we didn't get to do that in school, then we find ways to do it now. We find ways to circumvent, as much as we're able to, our biases and our
Don't you feel like that starts with understanding and acknowledging that, yes, we have biases?
It sure does. You have biases. You are a mystery to yourself. You are not one of the 93% people who think they're a better driver than everyone else. You are not above average in all those tests that we take. Yes, it is incredibly beneficial to develop whatever skills that you can, of studying both really studying how the brain works, and how personality is made out.
Yeah.
That, I think, is probably one of the biggest gifts of my life.
I find it absolutely fascinating, and like sort of almost endlessly fascinating, because there's always some new aspect of it that I'm like, oh, this is super cool. So what I teach is called positive discipline. And I was probably 2 years in before I realized the true impact of the difference between positive discipline and negative discipline. And it came because someone in the Ninja Parenting community, which is my private coaching practice, said one day, I won't remember it exactly, but she basically said, like, all right, I get it. I'm on board with the positive discipline. I love praising when they do something right. But what do I say? How do I discipline positively when my kid writes on the wall? And I was like, oh, that's a really interesting question. And it doesn't have, it requires a mindset shift to get to, you know what I mean? Because you're not going to be like, oh, I love the color you used. You're
right. You're so expressive with your crayons.
Yeah, there's a really big difference between like sort of the firmness that is required in positive discipline, because there definitely is some, and the negative discipline of, oh, you did a bad thing and you're bad, and it's just
so what did you tell her to do?
I told her to to basically help the child own that, and to say like, okay, so this is this has happened now. Here's the scrubbing cloth, and here's the thing that you're going to do to clean this up. This was a mistake that you made. We don't write on walls. And this is how you're going to fix it, basically. Like helping the child take responsibility for something that they did wrong, but not in a way where you're telling them that they're bad and they did this bad thing.
Right. You're bad because you wrote on the wall. Oh, no, we don't write on walls in our house. This is why. And here's how you're going to clean it up.
And okay.
How different
after it's cleaned up, to be able to say like, you know what we're going to do? We're going to get our writing whiteboard. We're going to chalk this wall so that we're going to like make it a chalkboard so you can write on it whenever you want. We're going to do something because trying to sort of satisfy, why does a kid want to write on a wall? Because it's interesting. It's a big blank space, right? What can we do to I once spoke with some early childhood ed professors, and they were saying like, what's the verb? Like if your child is throwing things and they're not supposed to be throwing things inside, can you get them to a place where they can safely throw things? Or can you get them something soft that they can throw inside? Like, so if the verb here is writing, and on a vertical surface, like, how can we get her that? Like, how can we?
I love that. And then this all is us. We need to do this for ourselves. We need to do positive discipline for ourselves.
Yeah.
Right? What is this need that I have, or this desire that I have? And why am I just stomping on it and saying, no, you can't have that? You had a need and a need and a desire to walk again.
Yeah.
Right. And what happens is we walk away from those things because it keeps us defended, because then we don't have to hope, and we don't have to care, and we don't have to desire.
Yeah.
But in that hoping and caring and desire is where life comes and meets us, not halfway, but like 99%. I feel like life is right there going, okay, come on, just give me a little bit, and I'm going to come right in there, and I'm going to inspire you, and I'm going to help you, and just like make that one request, like make that one phone call.
Yeah.
Give yourself that whiteboard.
I would love to, I'd love to talk specifically about a couple of points in the book, but I just wanted to ask before I do that, I'm so curious about what your childhood was like, as a child, like were you supported, or how were you supported, I guess, if you did something wrong, if you went out of your comfort zone, and, I'm curious about like, what was your upbringing?
Yeah, it was, very, very loving and good, and also very traditional. My dad was 43 when I was born, so he was born in 1919.
Oh, wow.
So he was a very different generation. And my parents were both on their second marriages. My mom was quite a bit younger, almost 17 years younger than my dad. They stayed married for their entire lives. My dad died first. So they had a happy marriage, but there was a lot of being in, I think, a generational transition almost for them between each other, but also for how my dad was raised. My dad was raised in a very small, really not even a town. There was no town. He was raised in the country in southern Indiana, and my mom was raised in a small town in southern Indiana, so there was a lot of southern stuff, and yeah, definitely a lot of messages of what it meant to be a good girl.
Yes.
And yet at the same time, I was very much a father's daughter. I was bright, and I was extremely gregarious and high energy, probably ADD, but who knew that in the 60s and 70s? Thank God. And so they often didn't know what to do with me. So there was a lot of that, oh my God, you're too much. And at the same time, I would get the message, you can do anything you want. Right? And like kind of almost boy,
the sort of free way. You and me kind of.
Well, not so much, but more like I was a father's daughter. So he didn't have a son, so he saw me more as, you can be like me.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
You can be determined, and he was very much a self-made person.
So it was acceptable for you to sort of to do, I don't know, I'm thinking tomboyish, but like you can be whoever you want. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, it was more successful to be. It was supported to be ambitious.
Cool.
Supported to be ambitious. They never shamed me for being a tomboy, and then I became super girly in high school. And
I had the exact opposite trajectory. Sorry.
Did you? Super girly and then tomboy.
So like, I want everything pink and purple, and then by the time I was in high school, I wanted sweatpants.
That's cool. That's cool. I had a different outfit every day, and oh my God, I spent an hour getting ready every morning. So a lot of mixed messages, but I will say that I always knew I was incredibly loved and cherished. And when this book came out, I thought I mailed my sister a copy, but I forgot. And so I just mailed her a copy. I think it was last week. The book's been out for over a month now. And she wrote me the sweetest text. And she said, I thanked her because I took care of Mom for a big part of her illness, but she took care of her for the last almost 4 years. Neither one of us took care of her in the home, but nearby. And I thanked her for that and the acknowledgments. But then she said, Mom and Dad would be so proud. And that's so true. They really were always really proud of me. And sometimes they didn't know what to do with me. And sometimes I'm sure they sat around, had their cocktail at night and went, oh my God. So mixed, but I always knew I was loved and I always knew I was safe. I always, there was never any abuse or anything like that. And I always knew that my parents had my back.
Yeah.
Which I think gave me a lot of courage to try the things that I tried.
Yeah. Yeah. When scary stuff happened, like as it does in every childhood, how did you get through it? Like what gave you the sort of confidence or the ideas to keep going? And was there any person in your life who did that for you or helped you?
I think in some ways it's how I'm wired. I think that if I had a superpower, it's determination. I think that's changing as I age. I think something else is coming in. I've been getting the sense this year that sort of putting my head down and gritting my teeth isn't going to be the way forward anymore, which is probably a good thing. But I think I just have a lot of determination. I think I had a lot of desire to be creative always. So I would get super disappointed. I had a lot of disappointments in my life professionally and creatively early on in school. And I think there was just a part of me that was tough, just kind of built that way, right?
Yeah.
Built that way. And my parents were there, but they often didn't know what to do. I mean, I moved to LA to go to film school when I was 19. And I remember this moment, oh my God, my parents were like, what the hell are we doing? We're moving our kid to LA. We have no idea. They'd never been there. I'd never lived anywhere near a city. And I remember we pull into to get gas in a gas station. And my dad walks up to some stranger to ask him, what neighborhood should we look for my kid to rent an apartment in? Wow. And I think about that now with the 26-year-old and the 23-year-old. I'm like, oh my God, I put them through the ringer, right? They had no idea what to do. They had and they left me in LA, right?
Wow.
And they were, small town people. I was raised in a small town in Florida. They were successful and they traveled and things, but they were very provincial in a lot of ways.
Like if you just think about putting this story through the why bother filter, right? Like, so you have this real innate, like, that's where I want to be. And these are the people who helped you get there. And even though they were probably biting their nails and crying all the way home, they still, they knew that this was the way that you had to go. And don't you think that that's what's so important for a parent, like a gift that a parent can give a child is to say, like, I know someone who grew up in a family of accordion players. And when he became a teenager and wanted to play the guitar, that was it. Like it was years before he would, he was taken in by his family again, like that he would be accepted. Exactly. Right. What?
Oh my God.
You don't feel that basic kind of like acceptance. That's a lot to work through, I think.
It is truly our first job as parents. I wish I would have learned this earlier in parenting, is to say, I've got your back and you've got this, and I believe in you.
Yes.
And I'm here to help you. And I do this really well now with adult kids, but often, and I would doubt they could do it, and they could smell.
They could take, yes, they know.
I'll never forget a moment that I was parenting Lily. She probably was in maybe 8th grade. And we were Lily's my daughter, and we were starting to go at it. And I just fell into that moment of total acceptance and believing in her. And the whole mood changed. Like instantly. And I remember thinking, why can't I do this more often? Because I was so often in that place that we get to as people, as parents, as coaches, as teachers, of I'm not enough.
Yeah.
So therefore I have to scramble here, and I'm projecting it onto you instead of relaxing into that essential, I call it essential goodness and trust. And doesn't mean it's all going to work out by any means, but we have resources here, and we have so much more inside of us than we're ever usually aware of. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I have goosebumps because the the gift that you can give your child by saying to her, I'm here with you and you've got this. I mean, like, I support you. That I think is such a good recipe so everybody, you've got an opportunity. A lot of our listeners have little kids. I mean,
Oh,
that
yes,
was
you are so good that you have all these tools.
yeah. Yeah. And I don't think neither Jennifer nor I means to pile on in the sense of like, okay, switch on a dime, do it all right. Like that's not what we're trying to talk about here. It's just, if you can, this, I found it was really helpful for me because I used to be one of those parents who, like, I was afraid that my child, like, there were many times in their childhoods where I was worried that they were choking on a banana. Like, I was so terrified, or that we'd be walking past someone and they would try to kidnap them. I mean, like, I was terrified, and I missed a lot of the good moments of their early childhoods, even with all the education I have and everything. But if I had just been able to, the first moment where I got an inkling of the coolness of doing this was when my oldest was, I think, 6 and the youngest was 2, and we were visiting New York City. My brother lived in New York City. This was high craziness for me. I was terrified. We were there with my mom, actually, who grew up in Montreal, so she knows cities. And I was ready for like all the badness. And there was this one day where my brother wanted to take my kids and I on the subway to where he worked, which is Columbia University, so that he could show us like the sculptures and the cool stuff. And we're walking down the street, and he's got my 2-year-old on his shoulders, and our oldest is sort of like looking around Max, and people are like smiling and I'm like, this is New York City. People are like friendly on the subway. It was so cool. And I was like, all I had to do was just relax and enjoy this. And they also sensed that, the kids did, and they relaxed.
Sure.
Because we all could have been anxious.
We're pack animals.
Yeah.
We're pack animals.
So all right. Getting back to this book, this wonderful, wonderful book. I love the idea. God, there's so many things I want to talk about. I'm just looking at my notes. So discover the desire for what's next is the subheading. And I feel like we're just leaving lockdown. We're so uncertain about what the future is bringing. And because of all that, I kind of wanted to talk about like the first stages of bothering. And I wondered if we're a little short on time, but we've got probably 10 minutes or so, if that works for you, Jennifer. I'd love to talk maybe about the first one, and then about one of the stages of bothering, which make up the bulk of the book. Maybe the one, if there is one that you feel resonates mostly with you right now.
With the pandemic. I think it's actually this first stage, which is leave behind. So many of us are in some kind of leave behind right now. And the first thing that we really have to do is we have to be willing to kind of name that. And it may take some conversations with friends or a therapist or journaling or a partner. What is it that either has been left behind from no choice of our own? A job, a graduation, a trip. I mean, I could spend the next 10 minutes listing everything I've had to cancel, right? Because if we don't actually bring it into the present and acknowledge it, we can't move on to what's next. There's a part of us that is still hanging on, but I want that. Or we're so disappointed, we're so angry, we're so frustrated that the noise, that's creating so much noise in the system that we can't move on to what can be now. So it's the leaving behind. But the other thing I'm seeing in the pandemic leaving behind is there's things we don't want to go back to that were pre-pandemic.
Oh, interesting.
And we need to really be how brave and mindful, no pressure, right? It's totally up to you. These are the questions we need to grapple with. But, I spoke to a bunch of audiologists the other day, and a lot of them, it was the first time in a really long time, if ever as an adult, they had felt balance. Because they had all of them had shut down their practices. This was nationwide.
Audiologists? Like
audiologists. Yeah, people who give you hearing aids, and hearing tests, and hearing help. And they're a very much a caring profession, like nurses or doctors or therapists, parent educators. And so they knew, and a lot of them are self-employed, a lot of them have their own practices. So they knew that as things were starting to open up, it was going to be really like back to business as usual, plus all the questions about PPE and, all the stress that people who are touching people are now seeing, and how do we clean things? And they were like, how do we leave some of that behind? How do we not bring it back? How do we keep some of this balance?
Can you, I was going to say, I don't want you to lose your thought. But I was going to ask if you could jump a little bit more into, like, go deeper into that idea, because um, I thought you meant something completely different about, like, choosing what to leave behind. And this, anyway, I just wondered if you could talk a little bit more about, like, that, either that specific example or another one that would just talk about when you, like, this is leaving behind in a almost in a negative sense. No, that's not the right word. I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm just going to keep letting you talk.
That's okay. So maybe just another way to frame it that will make more sense is that there's things that you have been forced to leave behind because of the pandemic that you might not want to pick back up again.
Okay.
But if you are not actually conscious of that, your habits, the force of life of other people, of where you're comfortable, are going to come rushing back in as life opens up. Now, again, it's going to be different for everybody. We don't know what it's going to look like. We're obviously not all going to be out at the bars partying until 2 a.m. Haha, as if we are anyway. So there hopefully is going to be more time. But let me give you another example. I have good friends and neighbors, and their children are in high school, 9th grade and 11th grade. And they are all been so happy during the pandemic because they're not having to go to all the track meets. They're not having all these scheduled activities. The mom is super high executive powerful, and she has been working way less and working at home. So the question that they're sort of in is, what about this can we keep? And sometimes you don't have choice, and sometimes things are going to go back. But if we don't ask the question, then everything will go back to the way it was. Yeah. And then the other thing is, of course, is again, just the sense of disappointment. And, you know, where do we need to really feel that so we can leave it behind? I had to leave behind my plans for my book. And until I could, I was having literally not one idea what to do to promote a book virtually during a pandemic. I was blank and frozen. And I had to really grieve and leave behind all my visions and my plans and everything I thought was going to happen. And then I suddenly started to wake up, and I threw a virtual book party with 450 people. And,
I love
that.
I've
Yeah.
heard about that on Dan Blank's show. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it resonates so much with me because I'm just remembering, I hadn't really remembered this, even though it was just a few months ago when I first got home, and things were first in this, you know, this different time.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember having a couple of more than a couple. I had several anxiety attacks, and I've been seeing a therapist. I don't think you go through something like I've been through without a therapist.
Sure.
And so we're coming up on 6 years together, which is so wild. And he said to me, okay, so one anxiety attack is too many anxiety attacks. Like, we need to figure this out. We need to do something. And what I was noticing was they would come when I couldn't get words, like I couldn't find.
Oh, interesting.
And I felt so much like a toddler. I mean, I really, you know, little children struggle with getting words out. And this is exactly how I've been feeling. And I can remember one night my husband saying, like, okay, well, what are you grateful for? Because we always talk about 5 things you're grateful for. And I was like, I can't think of anything. I literally couldn't think of anything. And he was so patient with me. And I'm bringing it back to leaving behind because I want to leave behind the anxiety attacks and stuff like that, but I want to keep going with things like talking with my husband about what we're grateful for. Like, I want to leave behind the sort of disconnect that we have a great relationship. I'm so lucky. 23-time winner of the Husband of the Year award. I'm so lucky. But in this one little instance, like, this was something that was a real positive change that maybe wouldn't have happened, you know, without this. So I think we started to ask, like, what's possible?
And that's what I think is happening. And it's destabilizing for a lot of us, because one of the ways we manage our anxiety is through all of our rituals and routines and habits, and the people we see and the same cup of coffee we buy, and so much of that is gone. And so we do have to welcome and normalize these feelings of uncertainty and this desire for certainty that we all have right now. And at the same time, can we put our attention on what possibilities have opened up? And that, with attention, can become more real. Yeah. And we can start to think about, for example, someone on another book club group. I've been doing book club groups. But book clubs, I've been Zooming with book clubs. Let's make that make a little bit more sense. And one woman said, I want to leave behind my job. I don't want to go back to my job. Now, whether that'll be possible and what that will look like, those are all different questions. But until we acknowledge that, nothing can change.
Nothing can change. Exactly. So I interrupted you before about the audiologists. And just before we wrap up, I would love to hear I'd love for you to be able to finish your point.
Oh, I think the point was that they were experiencing that possibility of more balance.
Mhm.
And they were like, how, like for them, I think the real question was, am I going to allow myself to still have this? Or am I going to go back to sort of overdoing, over providing? Because the truth is, not in all of our lives, but in some of our lives, and at least in some areas, we have more choice than we act on.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were really like, wow. And so I was trying to get them to reflect on exactly what we're talking about here.
Yeah, very cool. And it makes me think of like now in my family and friends, particularly family, like we're all spread out across 2 countries. And I've seen more of them virtually in the last 2 months than I've seen of them in 2 years, and
Yeah,
it's just,
us too.
that feels good. I don't think I want that to end when this ends.
No, I noticed that my daughter and I talk way more on the phone. She lives in Seattle, and way more FaceTiming. And usually she wouldn't pick up, or we would just text, or, and that partly she's working at home instead of in the hospital. And partly she's not seeing her boyfriend. They're social distancing there because they don't live together and they have roommates. So there's reasons that are going to go away, and she's going to get busy again. But it's been so sweet.
Yeah. It's like we got to hang on to these memories. This is good.
Yeah.
Our college age student is home, and it's the same. It's like so.
Yeah. I wish she would come home, but she's grown up. She needs her life.
Yeah, that's true. Well, we do have to wrap up, but Jennifer Louden, I'm so thrilled that we got to bring you on the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, my total pleasure. Thank you.
Been awesome. You can find Jennifer at her website, which is jenniferlouden.com. And if you would like to, so I'm gonna say the website link, and then Jennifer, I'm gonna ask you to talk about it because you'll have better words than me. Okay, jenniferlouden.com/why-bother. It will be in the links in the show notes, so you don't have to worry about clicking all that if you don't want to. What will a listener find when they go there?
You'll find presents. So, and a way to get those presents when you buy the book in any form. So we just want to give you some more goodies for buying the book.
Cool. I love that. And even without the goodies, I'm just like, I'm going to go there when we're done because I bought the book, but I'm going to get the presents.
Go get the goodies.
But even without those, it's such a great read. You can also read the first chapter of Why Bother for free. I think time sensitive, but you can do that. Like I learned that today at the bottom of the About page. There's a place where you could read the first chapter. So there's a possibility that won't still be happening by the time this airs, but maybe.
No, I think it should be. We'll probably keep that up for quite a while. Yeah.
All right. And you can find me at WeTurnedOutOK.com. I recently started a book club there, actually, for my parenting books. We're reading them one chapter at a time, and you can go to WeTurnedOutOK.com to find out more about that. And I always finish up with a special thanks to our producer, the man whose voice you heard at the top of this show. He is in the midst of asking his own why bother type questions right now, as he figures out where he wants to go on his, work and earnings journey. He is the almost squeakingly close 23-time winner of the Husband of the Year Award. He's Benjamin Culp. And again, thank you so much for listening. We will see you next time.